fact is still a very important part of the Bostonian order. Siya po yung tinatawag namin God's geek kasi siya po yung isang kilala po namin pare who is at the forefront of trying to lead a revolution in the educational system in our country. He was the chairman before of the Microsoft Partners in Learning program, of which I was happy to be a part of as well. He was once also a consultant at the Department of Education, specifically for their IT program, a few secretaries back. And of course, ngayon po mga kaibigan, he is still very busy with his foundation called Learn.ph in trying to democratize and provide access to the best quality education to all of the students here in the Philippines. Mga kaibigan, a round of applause please for Father Jomar Legaspi.
In the name of the Father. It's a pleasure to be with you here. It's great to see a lot of young people here. I hope to challenge your minds as well as to challenge your entrenched ideas about education. I was a principal before the Bosco Makati for 6 years. And I don't think if I'll be a principal again, I'll do the things I've been doing before. I will literally overhaul the school. The title of my presentation today is End of Schooling, Beginning of Learning. And I guess one of the reasons why up to this point of time, we have not really reformed or transformed our educational system, although we have so many bright guys out there. Because literally all the reforms that they've been doing are just focused on infrastructures. They have not really challenged the fundamental framework upon which our basic education or formal education has been anchored for ages. The problem with our basic education today is that it's anchored in a framework that is obsolete. And yet it is still in use. They're anchored in basically two ideas, two frameworks. During the medieval ages, the power structure of our educational system today basically reflects the power structure of the medieval age. That's why you have what we call doctors. Doctors are people who can teach. It comes from the Latin word docere, docere. And only doctors can actually teach. That's why we have what we call professors. Professors are those who have the authority to speak about something. It's very hierarchical. The academic achievement ladder is always degrees. We call them basically authorities, authors. It's defined by what we call authors. That's why the word authority. And a lot of professors today, and a lot of teachers today, they still behave like kings and queens of the medieval ages. Woe to you if you stand up in class, raise your hand, and challenge the thought of your professor. Because, teka muna dahil, doctor ako. May PhD ako eh. And you have the guts and the gall to stand in front of my students to challenge my ideas. That's exactly the prevailing power structure in our formal education. Whether it is a public institution, whether it is run by priests and nuns. The same. Very hierarchical. Another framework upon which our formal education is based is that the learning design and the experience reflect the infrastructure and the processes of the industrial factory. Why? First, you have standardization in the factory. Step 1, step 2, step 3. You don't fit in the standards, they kick you out. You're a misfit. Or you're a moron or an idiot. Standards. Synchronization. Everybody has to go to school from 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And one of the things I've always asked DepEd, and I'm still asking DepEd and administrators is this: do our kids today need to go to school 5 times a week, 6 hours a day to get basic education? Do you actually have to go to college for 4 years or 5 years to get a course? Hello? Do you need to cluster learning experiences in terms of semester, trimester, and whatnot? You have also highly centralized system. That's why in DepEd, I can't understand why there is a national textbook. Why? Because it's centralized. And the problem with this is, since learning is index and experience, your textbook and example mo John Matt is about the mall. And the guy is coming from a fishing village who doesn't have a mall. How can he understand mathematics in the context of a mall? He doesn't even know what a mall is. And that's the problem with centralization. That's the problem. The other one is concentration. You put them in one place at one given point of time. I like this quote from Peter Drucker. Criminals were rounded up and concentrated in prisons. The mentally ill, rounded up and put in lunatic asylums. And our children are rounded up and concentrated in schools. Exactly as workers were concentrated in factories. So I get the question, do our kids need to go to school 5 times a week, 6 hours a day to get basic education? Another issue, as we said, is centralization. What we call this. Curriculum is defined from top to bottom, and yet we have 17 regions with diverse ethnic, what they call this, configurations, and yet we have a one-fit-all educational system. One-fit-all curriculum, one-fit-all textbooks. No wonder the people in Mindanao, the kids in Mindanao don't understand exactly what the textbooks are, because the textbooks are anchored and indexed on rural, on urban experiences of students. Schools are still modeled on a curious mix of the factory, the asylum, and the prison. We are glad to see the end of traditional factory. Why should we expect the school model on it to be welcome to children? Hargreaves is one of my idols. He was my professor when I was at Columbia. And he's a guy who really challenges. That's why he has a lot of enemies. Because he really cuts them. And that's what we need now. We really need to challenge our entrenched ideas and paradigms about education before we can move on. Unless we challenge that, we can't move on. All the things that we will be doing will just be superficial. Make-ups lang yan. The essence does not change. Knowledge can't be taught nor transmitted. That's very, very important. Teachers cannot teach you how to do things. You create, knowledge is constructed. You create your own knowledge out of the experience in front of you. We make our own construction and interpretations of the knowledge of the experience that we have. And knowledge making is about experience, doing things. The problem with the school is we teach students how to memorize things from grade 1 up to college. Learning, likewise, is indexed on experience. You cannot teach math to a student in the rural area who hasn't seen even a mall, and your example of math problems and learning experiences is about the mall. The classroom has never been meaningful to a lot of our students because of centralized curriculum, the context of which where our students are coming from are not indexed in their learning experience. I am a very strong proponent of abolishing the national textbook. The other one is kids learn in different ways. That's now the prevailing findings of cognitive science. Some are tactile, some are what they call this, are graphical, visual, some are auditory, and yet teachers present the material in the same way. In the same way. That's why the learning materials in our schools are biased to those who are textual. And so those who learn are textual students. And the other students, you call them misfits. Why? They don't understand the damn thing about what you're talking about because their ability to learn is not textual. That's a problem with centralized curriculum, one-fits-all curriculum. I have a nephew who can do multitasking. He reviews, he watches NBA, and meron pang iPad. Okay. And that's the kids. And yet, the school wants them to conform to one way of behaving, one way of learning. And that's why at the end of the year, we have so many students who they act like zombies. So why not? Why not reconfigure or transform our schools into open learning spaces? What do I mean? Open learning spaces. Open learning, actually this is not a new idea. There is such a school as open classroom, where students, you have learning spaces, different learning spaces. Let's say my tendency, my intelligence is music. There is a learning space for musical, with musical intelligence. I go there. I learn math, I learn science in the context of music. That's how it is. Then I collaborate with other students, with professionals, within my group, within the country, and within the world. Your classroom is no longer confined to the four walls of the classroom. Your classroom is the world. Open learning spaces. If I can finish my work in one month, I go to the next level. I don't need to go for another 9 months to wait for the others to finish the work. We have done that. We have done that with the street children. It's by levels. And these street kids, they come from we have 17-year-old with an IQ of grade 3 or reading level of grade 3. And yet, with the leveling, with levels, they move from one level to another as they finish the requirements and the competencies of that level. So one kid can go to one level in 2 months or 3 months. Why do I need to wait for the others for 11 months to graduate from my course if I can take it in 1 year? Why do I have to go for 2 years to get a degree if I can take it in 6 months? That's basically how it is. And you cannot do this with the current infrastructure that we have, with the campus defined in a place. You need to put what we call the technology component, the connected learning communities. That's why the affiliation today now of schools in the future will not be by districts. Their affiliation will be by networks. In a network, you have a hub. You may have a central school, but basically it's a web. Web professors are shared in the network. I could be a professor in in UP, and yet I could mentor a student in Ateneo or in the University of Makati. I could be a professor in Harvard, and yet I could mentor a student here. It's a student in Mindanao. As long as I belong to the network. As long as I get connected to the network. That's the power of the network. Creativity is given as much importance as numeracy and literacy. Our formal education today defines intelligence as you're good in math and you're good in languages. If you're not good in any of them, you're stupid. That's why we have these young kids, entering grade 1, bubbling with life, creative. And they go through high school, they come out of high school, they look like zombies. Why? They can't think for themselves. Because all through the formal education, they have been taught to give always the right answer to the teacher. When you want kids to be creative, there are going to be mistakes. But the formal education has stigmatized mistakes. We give tests. May correct, may cross. Diyos ko, pag nakita ng bata, it's the greatest hindrance to learning and creativity. And to my mind, creativity is the saving grace of the country. Why Filipinos, by default, are creative. We cannot compete anymore with China in manufacturing. What we produce here with 10 pesos, we produce with 5 cents. We need to produce students who are creative, who can think out of the box. Why? Because the reality today, change is very, very fast. Change is very, very fast. What you know today does not assure you that you're successful tomorrow. Who is going to be very successful in the next 10 years? Kids who can think for themselves, who can create for themselves. That's why we should reform education and not stigmatize mistakes. If I were the Secretary of Education, I will do away with grading system, with ranking. Rather, students should be judged by what they can do and what they can produce at the end of the day. Project-based learning involving in real activities. I developed a course which is actually challenging the formal course. It's Masters in Instructional Design and Technology. I said this masteral program is only for 11 months. There are only 10 days intensive face-to-face, and the rest is online mentoring. And I can assure you, if you do well, you can finish your masteral in 11 months. We have done it, we have proven it with public school teachers. When I presented it to a university for approval, the Kinetic Council asked me, how many units is that? How many credits is that? Bakit walang philosophy of education? I told them, Ma'am, why they're not going to be philosophers of education? Why do you have to put it there? When at the end of the day, they have to be masters in instructional design. If at the end of the day, they can produce real good learning materials, then they could be masters. Not because they could philosophize about education. There are so many subjects today in formal education that are so useless. Why? Because it has always been done like this and like that. To be masters, you have 42 credits. To be doctoral, you have 76 ba yun? Why do you have to do that? Diba? Teachers should be taught as designers of learning and not purveyors of information and content. Our our kids can teach themselves. Our kids are not stupid. There is a very nice project in India called Hole in a Wall. I don't know if you've heard that. Basically, it's in NIIT. Basically, they in a wall of a university in India, they put a hole. And on that hole, they sinalpak nila yung computer, yung PC. With the monitor outside, and there's a hidden camera with internet access, with a mouse and keyboard. They wanted to see whether kids would learn how to use the computer or teach themselves the content in the computer. They were amazed of what they saw. And these are kids in the most depressed area in India. I don't think our kids are that stupid. That's why I've always told them, scrap your literacy, your computer literacy programs, because the kids can teach themselves technology better than our teachers can teach them. And faster for that matter. We should believe that our kids can learn by themselves. That's the basic framework. Because if that's the basic framework of a teacher, then we could allow students to be creative. But if the basic framework and paradigm of the teacher when it comes to the school is, these kids, they don't know anything. I have to teach them something. Which is basically what are the basic paradigms and framework of teachers. From basic education to higher education. I know better than them. How can we prepare our kids for a future that we have not yet defined with tools and strategies of a world that has been, let alone dead? As a parting word, if you can Google it, why teach it? Thank you very much.